Hi guys, welcome to our virtual classroom. I hope that this video finds you well and not overwhelmed. I know some of you are voicing your concerns about some of the workload that you're having to do for different classes. I understand you completely, believe me. This takes some adjustments, actually a lot of adjustments. You're having to manage chores and you're having to manage all the things that you do at home. Even finding your own schedule to get back into your rhythm of things. And so as for me, I know that I am going to be a little bit more flexible in, with the hours, answering your texts and answering your emails. And also, if you have questions, definitely talk to me and we'll be in communication. I know it's difficult. You don't always, or you can't always manage the class as you would before, especially since everything is online. And sometimes the connection comes and goes, and it's a little bit scary when you're depending on this mode of education. So we are going to be changing some things in our syllabus. We have a paper that's upcoming, and it was going to be a debate in one where you were going to pair up and write an essay together, and that was the original plan. Some of you would be for, the others would be against, and then collaboratively you would come up with one mode of argumentation, either the Rogerian or classical or Tolman model. But what I'm going to do, because of the time that we have left, and also it's not easy to get together with someone in these days. So what we're going to be doing is splitting those two up. Instead of a 4-page paper, we're going to do two shorter papers. And those are going to be, you can practice both the models that we saw last. I posted some videos for you on Google Classroom. You can access those. Those are for review. I didn't think I needed to make new ones for those because that's something that we already covered in the class. Some we had extensive, lectures on, and then the other, we kind of did a reading of it in your textbook. So I'm going to ask you to continue reading your textbook, go on to chapter 7, methods of reasoning and fallacies, and go watch the videos on Google Classroom. I'm going to set a link here as well on Blackboard for you to follow those. I found those two videos online from professors, so I feel that they're a good review for you to come back to the Tolman or the Rogerian model. So we're going to break that one big essay into two smaller essays, 2 pages each, and that'll still count towards your page count. So it'll be 2 and 2. And then our final paper, our final research paper, that I'm looking about cutting down the pages as well. So we'll talk about it as we are going to get there. Definitely, if you have questions, let me know. I'm going to try to put out 2 videos a week or so, reviewing the material that I'm expecting you to learn. Obviously, it's not the same thing as being in the classroom and asking questions immediately, and it's not the same as interacting with your peers and learning from each other. So bear with us. Both you and I are in this together, and all of your classmates, and we are learning. We're new at this. I've made mistakes even on Google Classroom, and some of you thankfully let me know. I'm getting used to it just as you are, so bear with me. Okay, so this week we are going to be reviewing inductive and deductive reasoning. And while I may be a little bit more flexible on turning, some deadlines, some essays, because of connections and stuff like that, I would like for you to rise to the expectation. So the expectation is that you do the readings, because if you don't do the readings, yes, I'm going to give you a video and I'm going to give you a PowerPoint, but if you don't do the readings, you're not going to fully understand the whole concept. And some of these concepts may be difficult to grasp, may be difficult to take in all at once. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break it up. And this week I've decided to do, or this video, I decided to do deductive and inductive reasoning, which is the first part of chapter 7. In chapter 7, you're going to see the reasoning methods and a little bit of the nature of the fallacies. I do want you to read that. I'm not going to cover that it's a shorter section, but I do want you to understand that because not everybody uses fallacies on purpose. Those just come about for lack of not knowing the content that they're discussing, lack of research, lack of just, making assumptions about the audience or making assumptions about the text or making assumptions about the research itself. So fallacies are not always necessarily done on purpose, but when they do happen, you need to be able to recognize them and you need to stay away from making those mistakes. So please read chapter 7. The beginning of this PowerPoint is the beginning of chapter 7 is what I'm covering right now. Okay, so my goal for today is to help you understand the reading a little bit better, but definitely the book has really good explanations and examples that I will cover in the PowerPoint. At the end of the week, I'm going to set up a little bit of a Zoom. Please join me on Zoom for questions and answers. So I'm thinking about maybe Friday-ish. I don't know that we'll stick to our Monday, our 8 o'clock morning window. A lot of you aren't even awake at that time. So we'll have to reschedule for something later in the evening. All right. Okay. So let's get started. I'm going to switch a little bit over here. Okay, here we go. All right. Forgot how to use PowerPoint apparently. Here we go. Okay, so like I said before, this is the beginning of chapter 7. So reasoning, methods, and fallacies. All right. Okay, so in argumentative reasoning, you'll always have some arguments that are not going to be perfect. Every argument in some way is imperfect. And that's important to know because you can't always argue your entire point when you see your own flaws. That's good to recognize your own flaws, but it's what you do to recover from those things. So here are some examples of an argument that may or may not be perfect. All dolphins are mammals. All mammals have kidneys. Therefore, all dolphins have kidneys, right? Makes sense, right? Syllogism, it makes sense. All numbers ending in 0 or 5 are divisible by 5. The number 35 ends with a 5, so it must be divisible by 5. Makes sense, right? So there's some logical progression of ideas there, right? You have two premises and then you have a conclusion based on those two initial claims. All birds have feathers and all robins are birds, therefore robins have feathers. Makes sense. However, sometimes following syllogisms or this type of reasoning may not be completely valid. So you have all swans are white. Jane is white. Therefore, Jane is a swan. You see, all farmers like burgers. Jethro likes chicken wings. Therefore, Jethro is not a farmer. Okay, so there's definitely some inconsistencies and contradictions in these statements, and they're all following some type of reasoning. And this is deductive reasoning. We'll get into it a little bit more. So my point here is that all arguments are imperfect to some degree. Okay, and so when you choose a mode of argument, when you choose a strategy of reasoning, know that it's not 100% foolproof. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So what you should do is strive to not create the perfect argument, but the most effective one, the one that will be ethically and logically persuasive to your readers. Okay. There are several strategies of reasoning that you can choose from. The most common ones are deduction, which is the one that we just saw, syllogisms, induction, categorization, analogy, authorization, plea. Okay, the most common ones are deduction, induction, and analogy. Those are the most effective ones. And then you have categorization, which is something that you start off from the beginning by categorizing something and then moving from there. As a writer, not only you should determine what model of argumentations you want to use, like the organizational structure of an essay, classical, Tolman, or the Rogerian, which is to reach your audience, right? When you have, for example, the Rogerian model, you're talking to a very hostile audience that probably won't listen to you. So you have to kind of pose both sides of the argument. So those models of argumentation help you with the audience. The reasoning, though, is your logic, your own logic within your essay, okay? So the type of reasoning you should use to persuade your readers. Not only are you using the classical, the Tolman, or the Rogerian, right? With its individual things, but the way that you set up your premises, that's what's going to make the difference in being effective or not effective, okay? Remember that your line of reasoning should be both logical and ethical. And look into those two definitions a little bit more. Logical, not just that it makes sense, but also that it has logic. And I don't mean logic in sense. I'm talking about the psychological definition of, based on psychology, of logic, all right? And then ethics, not just credibility, but also what's within all of the ethical things that make up I guess the ethical things, like I had an example, it'll come back to me, but look into those two definitions. Yeah, I went blank, I don't know. The ethical, as in the credibility of a writer, the ethics behind it. There we go. That's the word that I was looking for, ethics. The ethics behind specific idea or something that they're proposing, right? Something within the moral compass of that community, okay? All right. So let's get into deductive reasoning. And deductive reasoning is the one that we saw before. It's the syllogism. There are many different types of deductive reasoning, but this is the most common one. And what you have really is you propose something that the audience already accepts as being true. They don't question your claim. So most deductive reasonings consist of two premises, or two claims, or propositions, if you would, and then they lead you to one conclusion, okay? And that is your line of reasoning. So for example, all cats meow, and we're gonna be using this simple little example found in your book. All cats meow, Cordelia is a cat, Cordelia meows. Simple, right? Might make sense. Okay, makes sense. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man. If you guessed it, then Socrates is mortal. That's right. So that is a syllogism, and two premises. You have the two claims there, and then you have a conclusion made from those two things. Okay, so far so good. However, deductive reasoning, as I explained a little bit earlier, can sometimes easily lead you to false conclusions. And these are called false syllogisms because they are rendered invalid. All crows are black. The bird in my cage is black. This bird is a crow. Okay? You might accept it or you might not, right? Based on the actual bird in the cage. So this in fact may be false, and therefore invalid reasoning that would come into question. So why use this type of reasoning in the first place if it's going to may lead you to false reasoning? Okay. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so it's true. It might be risky to use deductive reasoning, but don't discard deductive reasoning just yet. Okay, some syllogisms are easier to follow, and you don't have to spend so much time convincing your audience to accept a premise when you can use what they already know and based on their own observations already accept. For example, all cats meow. This nth mean something that you are not spending or you're not trying to convince an audience of, something for sure that the audience already knows because they already accept it. So you're not wasting time in your argument trying to do that, right? If you were to question, or the audience were to question that argument, then that would be, of course, inductive reasoning, which we'll get into in a bit. So deductive reasoning is an easier to follow type of reasoning, but it does have its flaws. And what I want you to use it for is to be able to recognize it. If you recognize it, then it's easier for you to refute, okay? So it could be a very powerful tool when you are refuting a claim. By calling attention to the many-sided complexity of a problem, for example, not all blackbirds are crows, that is too absolute. You raise the consciousness of your audience. Teach the audience to see the flaws of such argument and come closer to finding your own truth. So here, deductive reasoning can be a powerful tool when trying to debunk a claim. Okay, so if you find a deductive reasoning or premises that are based on deductive reasoning, it's easier for you to debunk them because you can call out, hey, wait a minute, not all blackbirds are crows. There are many other birds, different species that are all black. Okay, so you can try to point out that the actual argument may be too absolute, all cats meow. Well, if we question that, right? That would be inductive reasoning, but all cats meow, the all part is too absolute. All blackbirds are crows, too absolute. You're not leaving any room for anything else, okay? And sometimes that is not within reason, okay? So here's a successful way to pretty much refute a claim if you find a claim that is in deductive reasoning. First, identify the contradictions. Then identify inconsistencies that there may be in the two premises or even the conclusion. Identify omissions or oversights with this claim and reduce an unsound claim to its logical absurdity so as to expose the flawed reasoning more conspicuously. Can't speak today. Identify oversimplification. So these are the 5 steps that you would take to refute a claim when you find a claim in deductive reasoning. Let's look at this example again. All crows are black. The bird in my cage is black. This bird is a crow. Okay, so let's take a look at it closely. So here's the bird in the cage, and then this other one over here is a crow. All right. So first, let's identify the contradictions. So all crows are black. And here we have an actual crow that is not black. This is the hooded crow, which is mostly grayish white with some black. Okay, so there is already one contradiction happening. Not all crows are black. 2, identify inconsistencies. Okay, so that kind of is an inconsistency in such a simple premise. So there's an inconsistency, not even in the species of the crows are they all black, all right? Then identify omissions or oversight. So you can look at both the crows and you can also look at, the actual thing you're claiming that is a crow. So in this case, the bird. This bird is not all black. In fact, the beak is orange. The eye, the circle of the eye around there is orange as well. And if you look at the crow over here, everything is black in this particular crow. Even the hooded crow has black eyes. Okay, so there are some omissions and there's some oversight. So they were omitting the fact that this bird right here, this blackbird, I believe it's an Indian blackbird, has in fact an orange beak. Okay, so they had not seen that. That would be an oversight. They were omitting that there are certain kinds of crows that are not completely black. So here you have these three things going back and forth. And if you see what I'm doing right now, I am studying the evidence, which is something that you should do when you're refuting a claim. Okay, study the evidence. Let's move on. So here we have the number 4, reduce the unsound argument to its logical absurdity. In other words, this is your time to like have fun with it. All right. So the conclusion is this bird is a crow because it is black. Okay. And here I've mockingly put blackbirds, but these are all silhouettes. But you can see that it's a picture of a blackbird. So are those crows, even though they're labeled? And then this bird over here is black. Is it a crow? Probably not. Right. So I am kind of oversimplifying. I am kind of mocking. I'm reducing this argument to its absurdity. It is absurd to say that. Does that make sense? Not all birds are black. Now over here, I'm just making fun of it, right? It's a mascot. So when you take a deductive reasoning or a syllogism, something that is based on or follows the pattern of deductive reasoning, it's easier to refute it, okay? Now, how can you successfully use this method? How can you successfully do it? Well, sometimes you may qualify. You may qualify it and not make it so absolute. Okay, so let's take a look at inductive reasoning. All right, so I know always come back to the triangles. Deduction would look like this. You're looking at generalities and then you are making it very specific. Okay, all crows or all black birds are crows. What was it? Go back real quick. All crows are black. The bird in my cage is black. This bird is a crow. So in this case here, we're going from very general ideas to very specific. And induction plays the other way around. We're going to be looking at specific examples and then expanding it and then making a general conclusion about that. Okay, so here we're going to actually look at specific evidence. We're going to draw backwards. We're going to look at the evidence first and then make a conclusion, not the other way around. The other way around, we just make claims and then made a conclusion without even looking at the evidence. Okay, so, all right. So for inductive reasoning, in order to make this type of reasoning inductive, let's change our previous example from all cats meow, deductive, to is it true that all cats meow? So now it's become inductive. And it's simply because it's being questioned. Okay, so notice how the two premises are being questioned and it's no longer accepting or relying that the audience might already know something that all cats meow. It's not assuming that the audience accepted it. It is going to question it. With this type of reasoning, you strive to make sense of things you experience. It's based on observations rather than generalities, as I explained with the triangles earlier. Deductive reasoning goes from general to specific. And then while inductive reasoning goes from very specific to general. So you begin by examining evidence rather than make a generalization to build an argument. For example, let's look at our cats example. In inductive reasoning, you look at cat A, cat B, cat C. And you continue looking at, different samples, different cats. all right, until you've seen enough. And from that, you come to the conclusion, okay, most of them meow, therefore most cats meow, okay? So until observing enough to come to a conclusion or accept the conclusion that all cats meow, or reject it with evidence that some cats growl, some purr, some scratch. That's not a sound, but still, you may also qualify it by being more specific that some cats meow if they are a certain species. So that's a little bit more specific, right? So here you have several options. You can, of course, if you turn into inductive reasoning, you're going to question it. Then you are going to, you may qualify it, or you may simply accept it. In order to make a sound inductive reasoning, sound logical reasoning, you must rely or study the evidence. So you must look at the evidence first rather than afterwards. With deductive reasoning, we only look at the evidence when refuting the claim. We didn't look at initial evidence to make an argument. All right, so when you study the evidence, so I'm gonna move myself over here so you can see my little cat there. Is that cat really representative of all cats? Apparently this cat talks. Anyway, determine the number of samples observed. There must be a reasonable amount of samples. Samples, I mean like cats or whatever it is that you're claiming. Cats cats observe. A reasonable number of cats observed to determine a sound conclusion. Of course, you cannot possibly observe all cats on Earth, but you can definitely observe enough to come up with a pattern. A cat meows when they're hungry. A cat meows when they're, I don't know, do they sick? When are they sick? When they're sick, when they're hungry, when they're happy, when do cats meow? Or you can come up with a percentage that may lead you to a qualification based on your observation of the cats. 9 out of 10 cats meow. Okay. So now, determine if the samples observed are reliable. Okay, in this case, this cat is fictional. This cat is a meme, therefore it talks. Right, so those are not good examples. It's just kind of a joke there. But for example, if 9 out of 10 cats meow in the experiment, what is the correlation between those cats? What are some of those things that they have in common, or some of those relationships, or what are the things that are set in place, criteria, okay? Were they all in the same environment? Were they all the same type of cat? Okay, were they all presented with the same triggers? Was there a control group? Were there any sick cats, hungry cats? All right, so the samples must be representative of the population you're observing. This is something that I always tell you. When you're choosing an example, you cannot go with the example that's 1 in a million. Okay, you have to look at the examples that are representative of that. The ones that are going to help you convince, persuade an audience, whatever your purpose is. So, determining the samples observed are in fact reliable, and you might need to set up criteria for that, or you might need to find the criteria. When you are studying the evidence, obviously you may not be the one conducting the research, but you should definitely look at what were the things considered when they observe cats, for example. Okay, then finally look at the strength of the conclusion. Ensure that the conclusion you reach based on your gathered evidence, right? You read, you looked at the scenarios, that they make good sense. You cannot possibly gather the same results in disparate scenarios, right? Different scenarios that are completely different points. When studying the evidence, make sure that the researcher obtained the data or that you observed similar samples that are truly representative subjects of what you're observing. Set that criteria that will allow you to make or match samples in order to make a sound conclusion. You have to look at what was considered during any research, okay? When making your own conclusions, of course, you have to make sure that you based your argument on, in fact, data that it was collected correctly, okay, with all of the criteria. Okay, so we're gonna leave it up to here for today. Okay, these are, there are some more examples. If you go to this website, your dictionary, examples.dictionary.com/deductive reasoning. There's also inductive reasoning examples if you like more. There's definitely a lot more in your book as well, but I just found some of these that might be useful to you. So there's that website. You'll have this in your PowerPoint as well. And of course, I use your book. So continue reading chapter 7 and see what examples you can come up with. I'm going to give you a little bit of a couple of exercises to complete probably by Wednesday, so that you can get through the reading, at least the first section of the reading. Understand deductive, inductive reasoning. Our next video, we're going to get into categorization, analogy, plea, and that's about it. Continue reading the chapter, and I think that is it for this video. All right, so we will meet on Zoom. I will post a date on Blackboard or Google Classroom. Please check both forums. We are working on both. So, all right, I hope that you're doing well, and please talk to me if you're needing something. I'll be available. Send me an email, and I'll get back to your question. Thank you again, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Love you guys. I miss you. Bye-bye.